It is the 208th day that Ukraine is resisting a full-scale Russian invasion. TV channel 1+1, United Marathon, News Edition are with you. Russian nuclear terrorism in the Mykolaiv region. Tonight, the occupying army of the Russian Federation shelled the southern Ukrainian nuclear power plant. The rocket fell 300 meters from the nuclear reactors. Due to the powerful explosion, 3 high-voltage power lines were disconnected. The lights went out for a while. The shockwave damaged the NPP buildings. More than 100 windows were blown out. A huge crater remained at the impact site. Its diameter is 4 meters. It is 2 meters deep. Currently, the power units of the southern Ukrainian NPP are operating normally. There are no shortcomings of the equipment and the working conditions of the staff. The president of Energoatom, Petro Kotin, gave an exclusive interview to TSN. He says that if the Russians had attacked the nuclear power plant during the day, the consequences would have been human casualties. Currently, examinations are being conducted on what exactly the occupiers shot with. Energoatom has already applied to the IAEA. It was the first time in the past 3 months that a rocket had exploded in close proximity to a nuclear power plant. The rocket explosion occurred at a distance of 270 meters from the 3 nuclear reactors. The explosion was powerful. It damaged the containments that protect the nuclear reactor. Apart from nuclear terrorism, it cannot be characterized in any other way. The Russian Federation is not going to stop its terrorist activities. Now the Russians are spreading terrorism to nuclear power plants as well. Russian attacks on Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk region. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, the enemy attacked Zaporizhzhia with rockets. 8 strikes are reported. Previously, the targets were infrastructure objects. 2 more explosions occurred at dawn. One of the rockets exploded in the city, the second, in a village near the regional center. A private house was destroyed there. So far, it is known about 1 wounded person. Over 40 hailstones were fired by the Russians during the night in Dnipropetrovsk region. In the Marginets community, thousands of people were left without electricity due to interrupted power grids. In Nikopol and the surrounding area, 10 private houses, farm buildings, cars, a water pipeline, and a power line were damaged. Elements of fragmentation and shrapnel ammunition were discovered there. These are weapons prohibited by international conventions, which the occupiers directed at the homes of peaceful people. 1 projectile contains up to 9,000 metal arrows. The zone of the damage is half a kilometer. That night Mykolaiv Oblast shuddered from the explosions. Mykolaiv and the town of Nova Odessa were hit by 9 rockets from the territory of the occupied Kherson region after midnight. Videos from surveillance cameras are already on Telegram channels. The outskirts of Mykolaiv were shelled with cluster munitions. In particular, the part of the city where the medical institutions where the sick are located. 300 meters of contact wire of the tram network were damaged. Renovators are already restoring it. 1 rocket hit the yard of a private house. The explosion hit garage cooperatives. TSN correspondent Natalia Nagorna is currently in Mykolaiv. She reports that the Russian troops hit the same place. In Nova Odessa, it also flew near garages, a supermarket and a school. At the same time, in the south of the country, it is velvet season, so the weather is warm during the day. If it were not for the war, there would be many tourists and vacationers here. But the sea is mined and there is no possibility to swim this fall. At least there are no enemy ships on the horizon. About 4 explosions rang out. 3 medical institutions in the territory of the city of Mykolaiv were affected. There is no major damage in the city. Broken windows and doors. In some places, the facades of buildings were damaged. Everything burned. Everything has burned. There is not even anything to save. It is necessary to take everything to the dump. We have already learned to restore it very quickly. We are ready to move patients and medical equipment, so that they continue to work, says the representative of the Red Cross. There are a certain number of urgent people here. That is, those who need urgent help. Russian equipment was destroyed, civilian houses were destroyed and the Lavra was damaged. Military television released footage of Sviatohirsk liberated from the occupiers. Until February 24, it was a tourist town in the Donetsk region. Believers and tourists from all over Ukraine went there to the monastery. After a full-scale offensive, The monastery itself became a refuge for local residents. 4,000 people lived in the town. Currently, hundreds of people live here. There is no gas, electricity, or water supply in the city. Sviatohirsk was liberated more than a week ago. The occupiers shell it almost every day with mortars, barrel artillery and multiple rocket launchers. Russian equipment entered Sviatohirsk through Urova. There is a direct road from Novosiyoloki. She went there, and there she was met by our artillery. Everything that came in was met with torrential fire. Our artillery worked from 8 in the morning until 2 in the morning. She burned everything that moved. The bird is alive. The first evidence appeared that Kateryna Polishchuk, a captured Ukrainian medic from Azovstal, did not die. Russian propagandists recorded an interview with her. Behind the scenes, they call her a sniper, without having any reason to do so. Kateryna jokes, speaks Ukrainian and laughs in the eyes of the occupiers. Meanwhile, United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called on Russia and Ukraine to exchange prisoners. According to the formula of all for all, Dmytro Kuleba today flew to New York for the UN General Assembly, where world leaders are meeting for the first time in 3 years. During COVID, they sent video appeals. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky will speak from the screen. On the sidelines of the General Assembly, our diplomats will work on guarantees of Ukraine's security. Also about bringing Russia to international responsibility for its crimes and increasing supplies of weapons and financial aid to Ukraine. We have updated operational data on enemy losses from the General Staff of Ukraine. -170 invaders for the past day. In general, almost 55,000 occupiers have been destroyed since February 24. 2,212 tanks were crushed. 4,720 enemy armored fighting vehicles. The occupiers also lost expensive armored vehicles yesterday. Also, 1,313 enemy artillery systems were disabled. The Ukrainian army neutralized 312 rocket artillery systems. 168 air defense systems. Our soldiers landed 251 enemy planes, 217 helicopters and 920 drones. On the 208th day of the full-scale war, Ukrainian defenders have already shot down 238 Russian cruise missiles. 3,581 vehicles and fuel tanks were destroyed and 15 enemy ships and boats were sunk. Data on enemy losses are constantly updated, and this list does not include the Su-25 attack aircraft that was shot down this morning. He was shot down in the Kherson region. He became the 252nd destroyed enemy aircraft. In the liberated territories of the Kharkiv region, new information appears every day about the atrocities committed by the Rashists during the occupation. In the village of Kozacha Lopan, on the border with Russia, the occupiers tortured and killed people for more than 6 months. More than 1,000 locals were forcibly deported to Russia. Currently, several dozen people remain in the village under daily shelling. TSN correspondent Victoria Streltsova visited there.
Son, my dear, I've been waiting for you, I've been waiting for you. My flower has bloomed. I thought that when a flower blooms.
Mom.
I knew. On September 10, Vyacheslav Zadorenko, the head of the Durgit community, was the first to walk to the village of Kozacha Lopan on the border with Russia. His mother was there under occupation from the first day of the war. I took everything, all your things, kept everything. Only there the house is mine.
Mom, you look good as always.
During the occupation, the prisoner about mother had the media doesn't do not repeat.
This rag in half. Glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes.
The woman was tortured.
The Russians knew it was my mother. They undressed her, put her on her knees on the snow. Interrogated. Psychological influence. More psychological pressure was on my parents.
Hundreds of locals were tortured by the Russians. The headquarters of the occupiers was at the railway station, where interrogations were conducted.
Their soldiers were sitting here, interrogating our local residents. After interrogation, they were pushed here, in this room. There were 5 or 6 people in this room. They were kept here, they were not released. They were here for 3 or 4 days. A watchman sat here.
The Russians terrorized local residents with constant shelling. The occupiers told them that the armed forces of Ukraine were firing at them. They tried to make people hate their defenders.
There was such a case. They announced the distribution of humanitarian aid and gathered a large number of people in the square. At this time, they pulled out their volley fire systems in the direction of our military forces. From the side of Zolochiv, they attacked our village of Kozacha Lopan. People died. Their TV reporters were working at the scene. They filmed a story about how Ukrainian Nazis destroy the local population.
The village was originally owned by Ossetians. They, people say, committed the most atrocities.
A neighbor lived there, on the opposite side of Chernikova Street. His wife was placed at the door. He pointed the barrel of a machine gun at her. He threatened the child, and she is very young. They are terrible people, terrible people. Kill him, without a passport, without a sentence.
At first the Russians had no idea about it. As soon as they understood, they began to forcibly deport people to Russia.
That night everyone was woken up. They started shouting about a mass evacuation from Kozacha. Ukrainians will come here, they will kill you, they will cut off all your heads. In most cases, those who worked at the top of the village council were taken away. That is, bosses. For 6 months, they scared us by telling us that Ukraine was killing, that they were entering the villages. Here they seem to be shooting at people and throwing grenades.
After the escape, the Russians shelled the village already from the territory of Russia. Even during our filming there were explosions. They shoot out of desperation, our military is sure. When 3,800 square kilometers were freed, did it add motivation and mood?
Yes, of course. I will say that after 3 months of being in the trenches under constant fire, moving forward is very motivating. And to my personal staff and to myself.
Several dozen people in the evacuation. Interesting that. Local authorities are trying to restore critical infrastructure as soon as possible. People painted Russian flags on the streets. Why do we have strangers here? This is not our flag, we are Ukrainians. Why Russian colors? Victoria Stritsova, Svitlana Pavuk and Vitaly Pavuk, Kharkiv region, TSN 1+1 Marathon Jedini Noviny.
As of midnight, Poland, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania stopped admitting Russians with valid Schengen tourist visas. It does not depend on which country issued them. Unlike other EU countries, which only suspended the simplified visa regime with Russia. The governments of the Baltic countries and Poland took drastic measures. They believe that traveling to the EU is a privilege, not a human right. Citizens of the aggressor country cannot use such a privilege when people are being tortured and killed in Ukraine. These countries call the introduction of restrictions on entry to them a matter of national security. Exceptions were left for relatives, diplomats, drivers, for treatment, for holders of residence permits. True, even these citizens of Russia are already being watched more closely in the EU. The other day, Poland, for example, refused to extend the residence permits of several dozen Russians who entered the country in February this year.